David Liggett with datacenterHawk, focused on cloud and colocation, data center industry trends, and dynamic market. Well, I'm David Liggett with datacenterHawk, and I am so excited to be joined with the CEO of Skybox Datacenters, Mr. Rob Morris. Rob, thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you.
Absolutely. Great seeing you as well, and thank you for having us.
Absolutely. You've been in the data center industry for a long time. You know, we're now getting to the point, I think you and I both, where we can look back and go, gosh, we've been doing this a while. And you've had a great run at Skybox and really building this company from scratch. And so talk about that, a little bit, where the company is now and where, the company is focused as it relates to some of the properties and data centers that you're currently developing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been, it's been looking back, I think we talked about 2 years ago, and it's been an exciting stage of growth and really maturity for the company. And a lot of that has really been around expanding our core team, especially over the last 12 months. And so it's been really exciting to take a look at the various opportunities that we have in terms of expanding our specialized skill sets. We've added personnel around technical accounts management, facilities management. We've added some specialization around development on the West Coast with Jason Schlutt, and then our most recent hire, Haynes Strader, who's our new Chief Development Officer, and really bringing some firepower in terms of our new development. Because historically, everything we've done to date has been on a 100% speculative basis, but that requires a lot of early digging in terms of due diligence, timing on the market, finding the right asset, and with Haynes and the core strengths that he brings from CB and site selection, it's just the perfect addition in terms of some of our earlier stage projects as we bring them through to development.
Yeah, and you all have certainly some new projects on the horizon, which I want to talk about. But I think what's been interesting about Skybox over the last several years is the investment that you've made here in Texas, in Dallas and in Houston. But talk about why these markets have stood out to you from a development perspective. Why Skybox chose to put the money and capital to work in these markets, and how that's turned out for you.
Yeah, no, obviously being based in Dallas, it's such a strong market from a connectivity and a power perspective, but also just the level of design and engineering expertise. A lot of that for the data center industry resides in this market, which is fundamentally why we're based here. No matter what we're developing across the country, it just gives us better connective tissue in terms of seeing a project through. But specific to Dallas and Houston, Dallas just continues to be a great place for enterprise. We've got another 50 acres available at our legacy campus in Plano, which from a corporate attraction standpoint, in our opinion, it doesn't get much better than that in terms of where we're located and the other major companies that are just around the corner, and the availability of multiple substations for true power diversity. You don't really get that, especially in a lot of the newer markets. You're pulling from a single substation, single feed. You can get a really truly resilient operation established there without too much headache. And then Houston is just a whole different animal. They're pretty much complete and total opposite sides of the spectrum. We build there for two very different types of users. One is focused on absolute mission critical operations. We do old school 2N infrastructure in that market just because of all of the inclement weather and storms that come through that area. We want to make sure we're up and running no matter what, and knock on wood, that campus, since commissioning, we've had zero downtime whatsoever. And I know a lot of that is thanks to not only the operating team, but the 2N topology. It's a little bit old school, but it's that level of redundancy is truly needed there. And then there's the N, there's the HPC customers. There's nothing else like it we've seen across the country. The densities that we're pushing in that market, up to 1,500 watts a square foot with either air-cooled HPC or immersion applications for geoseismic. They're just looking for, absolute speed. It's the difference between an F1 race car and a Rolls Royce. You got to strip down to the most essential pieces and make sure you can operate as quickly as possible. So we've really enjoyed that market. It's been a tremendous amount of fun for us.
Yeah, and I think you've done a great job of highlighting the differences between the types of companies that are looking in, Dallas versus Houston. And a lot of that has to do just with the business climate and makeup of each one of those markets. Dallas traditionally has been a really good place for, Fortune 500 headquarters, regional hubs, and with that, traditionally in our market, can come data center demand to support, production facilities, et cetera, in a market like Dallas. Whereas Houston, obviously, the energy sector is, the largest market there, but it also has a very strong healthcare industry there as well. So I think that's one of the interesting things about those two markets. There's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences as well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we're launching a new project in Dallas, the reach is very much national. You have no idea where the end user is coming from, but 9 times out of 10, their headquarters is not actually based in Dallas. They're coming to Dallas because of its relative attraction as a pure data center market. Whereas Houston, it's hyper local. That user could be around the corner or down the street just because of where they are headquartered. I mean, Houston has more Fortune 500 headquarters than Dallas, and I would need to double check on this, but 5 years ago, more than any other city in the U.S. with the exception of New York. And so that tells you there's a lot of companies based there that want to have some function of primary compute or their processing geoseismic or HPC compute located in market where they can quickly access it.
You mentioned the topology of the electrical infrastructure earlier. So if you're joining Rob and I on this interview, one of the things that we have seen really change over the last 5 to 7 years is how data center operators have chose to build speculative capacity, both from an electrical and mechanical side of things. Talk about that a little bit, Rob, because you've been right in the middle of that. You've been right in the middle of trying to determine what is the best use of our capital on a speculative basis, and how will that hit the market in the best way? How if we bring a data center facility to the market, whether it's a powered shell or a turnkey data center, how do we make sure that we have what we need to advertise and to bring in the most amount of customers?
Yeah, no, it's been, trying to get the capital investment to go as far as possible and balancing that against the ultimate uptime and reliability requirements of that particular customer is everything, right? And the industry has matured so much from that perspective, really moving to the majority of new product across national markets, doing a 4 to make 3 type lineup. And now, most of the new turnkey implementations we're working on are at least a 4 to make 3, but most of them are moving up to a 6 to make 5. And there's even a number of extreme examples of 13 to make 12 or 12 to make 11, just using a simple block redundant topology. And that's certainly encouraging because the cost of a lineup in and of itself, on a dollar per megawatt basis, $4.5 million, hasn't changed a whole lot in the last 3 or 4 years, and the playing field really has been leveled. And so at that point, you have to look at, okay, how many lineups am I ultimately going to install, and how much of that will be true redundant capacity? And so, in terms of how we look at deploying, when we deploy speculative turnkey, it's hyper focused on that market. For example, like I said, in Houston, we continue to go 2N. Because there are issues in that market with N+1. We go under a lot of extreme circumstances where you're running on backup facilities for quite an extended period of time compared to most markets. So that level of resiliency really does sing there. And in other markets, most of it's closer to that 6 to make 5. But in terms of what we deploy day one, most of what we're doing going forward really is powered shell. And so we see this evolution in terms of what users are demanding in terms of flexibility. A lot of these companies, primarily hyperscale users, have a better cost of capital than us or even most of the REITs that are out there in the market today. And so really we see the value being in the building and the power. And that's why most of those new projects we're moving forward on right now are fundamentally powered shell, but enabling a 16-week build out to turnkey, because those turnkey environments can look so different from one another. Yep. And allowing for flexibility not only in the design, but how capital is used in order to build out that facility.
Yeah, it seems like the hyperscale users in the market, and these would be if people don't know what that hyperscale term to us means, that really is the largest data center users that are out there, and typically these are cloud providers that are just growing their platforms, a lot of times faster than they can keep up with. The things we've seen them really value are speed to market, flexibility, and scalability. So it seems like when they're looking to quickly get to a market, those are the things that really guide their decisions. Have you seen that to be the case with those types of companies?
Yeah, I mean, the hyperscale community is by far the most sophisticated group of end users the industry has ever seen. And where there are markets where there's plenty of land available and plenty of power available, a developer like Skybox is not adding a tremendous amount of value. Anyone can go hire a high quality national general contractor like a Holder or a Turner and go build a world-class facility without a tremendous amount of incremental investment in terms of innovating the product. And so where we have value is providing speed to market. And that's locations where the real estate may be harder to acquire, the power may take longer in order to facilitate. In the last 18 months, the amount of time our development team spends on facility, medium voltage, and transmission right-of-way and acquisition has probably gone up 5-fold.
Interesting.
It's becoming really, really challenging, especially in these core markets, like an Elk Grove Village, like a Dulles, like a Santa Clara, to physically get the circuit from the substation to the facility, or the transmission from the switch to the substation at your campus. And that's really where we can add the most value. We're able to look out, deploy our capital, 24 months in advance to provide that solution that enables, hey, we've got a couple new products we have to bring online very quickly, 30, 40, 50 megawatts. The Skybox product, the box itself, has the power and can make that happen in short order while still allowing for flexibility in the fit out and the operation.
Yeah, and I think what's really been interesting to watch over the last 5 years is that speed to market continually get compressed. And I think what it shows is, there's so much work that it takes to shave off a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever those time periods are. But I think it shows the maturity of, the data center operator community and how skilled they have become at being able to work through those things that you just mentioned, the easements from a power perspective and a connectivity perspective, working through zoning and permitting issues and things like that, so that they can meet the timelines and you can meet the timelines of these requirements. And that's, from our perspective, when we look at datacenterHawk in the data that we have been, analyzing over the last 7 years, and just this hockey stick growth that you see is really tied to what we just talked about, which is those hyperscale players needing capacity quickly, and people like Skybox and others being able to meet that demand.
Yeah, and it's even From just a permitting and entitlement perspective on top of the power, even though our new projects with powered shell, we're still going out for the air permits because, powered shell can be fairly worthless unless you're able to put the backup generation in. And that the thresholds to accomplish that per market vary wildly.
Sure.
The thresholds now in California with CEQA are the highest that they've ever been. And the level of scrutiny that the data center has in the community is also higher than it's ever been. We need to be good stewards of data center product in local environments that are becoming higher and higher density. Most of these new products are 2, 3, 4 stories. You're closer to residential, and there's greater scrutiny around emissions, sound, and making sure you're employing the latest and greatest practices, so you are a good member of the community and a friend to all the local residents. And so, the level of due diligence being performed there now is greater than ever because you want to have a successful product with a city that really enjoys your presence there.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's funny when you think about 10 years ago, the way the data center industry, went about things was very hidden and very non-engaging in the community, and it very different than what you just described. And over the last 10 years, we've seen a really, transformation. I think a number of reasons has led to that. Number one, I think people are certainly becoming more aware of how much they depend on technology to run their lives, and that's backed up by data centers. I think, too, the data center community has become much more aware of the fact that, hey, we've got to figure out ways to make sure that we are engaging with the community in a way that, allows us to be good corporate citizens and make sure that we're doing things from an environmental perspective that, leads the way with the amount of power, the amount of water that, it takes to run a data center facility. So I think that's a really important part of our industry, and I'm really proud of what's gone on over the last 5 years, and we'll be excited to watch that moving forward. You mentioned the words due diligence. You guys have been doing a lot of due diligence, as you think about how you've moved from Texas to other markets. Talk about just what's on the horizon for Skybox over the next few years.
Yeah, we've been spending a lot of time across primary and secondary markets across the country. We do have a new team established on the West Coast that we're focused on new development opportunities there. And then the most recent announcement is Skybox Chicago, which is a really exciting new project. It's a 190,000 square foot facility. We've brought 30 megawatts of redundant power in from ComEd from their really large Itasca substation, and it's in the heart of Elk Grove Village. So from a location standpoint, it is main and main, and something
right
that
in the middle of it.
Yeah. So looking at all the hyperscale growth there, the other great providers that are in the area, I think it's going to be a really meaningful addition to that core data center density you have in that particular market. And it's also really exciting. It's the first project that we have in a new joint venture with Prologis, something that we've coined as powered by Prologis. They've got, they're one of the largest real estate owners on the planet, and something we had been working with for some time with them on in analyzing various product they had across the country and where we might be able to facilitate meaningful value add with some of the existing assets, whether that be a site that we end up building greenfield on or an existing facility for renovation. And Skybox Chicago will be the first of those. We found a great facility with excellent bones that we were able to renovate and bring up to data center powered shell hardening standards, as well as close proximity to big power. And right along, some of the largest dark fiber routes that exist in Elk Grove. So it was a real win-win-win.
Well, that's first of all, any reference to the show The Office, the win-win-win, I always appreciate. But I also, it is a win for Chicago, to have another data center operator there, because we've seen the, demand really grow in that market. And you mentioned Elk Grove Village being right in the middle. I mean, from our perspective, that is where the focus has been, over the last 12 to 18 months as it relates to, number one, hyperscale growth, continuing to, I would say do things in Chicago they've never done before. But then also, too, we've seen some enterprise growth there as well, which I think it points to the strength of that market. We saw the tax incentive changes in the state of Illinois, last year, and I think that's had a difference. But just also the competitive market that's there, and the opportunity to house some of those requirements. So that's makes a lot of sense. I'm really excited for Skybox, and it'll be fun to watch that project grow.
Yeah, we're tremendously excited. It's Elk Grove Village is just phenomenal to work with. It's a group that really wants to see continued investment in the mission critical cloud and hyperscale space, and so it's been an absolute blast to work on, and we're really excited. We should be delivering that site in November of this year, so it's a really quick development cycle for us, and it's been tremendous collaboration with ComEd as well in terms of getting that amount of power available so quickly. So it's really exciting, and in working with Prologis, we've got a couple of additional markets that we'll be hopeful to make some announcements for at some point later this year.
That's awesome. So I want to switch gears for a minute, and you've been a leader in this space for a long time, and I always like to stop our data center talk and focus for a moment on just leadership in general. I always love hearing about, how leaders in our industry overcome challenges, and just kind of their mindset around that. And so, I just love an example from your perspective of, hey, this was it can be anything, but a leadership challenge we had to overcome. Maybe it was you as a leader or you as a team, but would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Looking back through the history of Skybox, there's really three events that are emblazoned in our memories in terms of true challenges that had to be overcome, not just by a single individual, but the entire collective. And the first one for us was certainly Hurricane Harvey. Just an absolutely devastating event. For the city of Houston, our customers, their families, etc., but something that really enabled us to build in a meaningful way, and not physically build with our facilities, but our relationships and how we as a team collectively solved problems and solved them very quickly. The next one is COVID. I mean, that was life-altering event for everyone globally, and locally, with the demand from work from home, and just overall demand on remote systems. It really took a lot of the available capacity in the data center industry and saturated it very quickly. I mean, for us, in a matter of 3 months, we were completely leased and sold out of everything we had available, because we had to enable a lot of near-term capacity for different users. And to do that and construct that during COVID was a challenge we did not take lightly, and created a lot of very innovative solutions, because we looked at, the last expansion in Houston was about just under 5 megawatts, and getting notice of award in July of 2020 and having to complete the project before December 31st was an incredible challenge. And that the bulk of the weight of that challenge was placed on our Houston team in order to put into action, construct and build, but do it in an incredibly safe way. And so one of the challenges that we took on as leadership of Skybox was, how can we develop the systems required to not only keep our personnel safe, keep our customers safe, and keep our vendors and contractors safe while we're building this thing in relatively close proximity. And so very early on, even in advance of award, we worked to identify unique and creative solutions to mitigate any potential COVID exposure. And so that was kind of a a recent example for us, but something that I think we really grew from. We, in collaboration with Corrigan and CPS, we developed this really unique airflow mitigation system using turning vanes and outside air and additional openings we created in the building just for maximum turnover of air. I think we were turning it over 12 times or so per hour, which is quite a bit for an indoor space, especially one that does not have formal HVAC. Obviously observing all the other protocols you would need to, but it's one that we could go back with confidence to our customer that we're building for, as well as other existing customers in the building, and tell them we've developed an absolutely safe set of protocols and systems to ensure that we're going to build this on time, but also do it in such a way that it's not going to put anyone in harm's way. And so that was, I think, a really rewarding experience for us to see how a bunch of individuals came together under pretty strict directive and developed something that ended up being absolutely one of the best solutions that could be devised and as safe as possible during those events. And as a result, we had zero COVID events or exposures on the construction site through that duration, and we delivered the project, I think, on December 23rd. So
there we go.
That was a nice win.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. From your mindset, and it's again a mindset from a leader in our space. What gets you excited about the next several years in this industry?
Yeah, I think outside of just geographic expansion, watching the evolution of the electric grid and how it reacts, because our needs as data center developers and providers and users, those needs just continue to ramp up. But yet we're dealing with electrical grids across the country that may not be expanding at quite the same rate. And so pretty much in every market we're working in right now, you're looking at these very unique solutions to demand capacity. And one thing that gets us excited is the increasing, relevance or just maybe requirement of low demand products, meaning users that we have that whenever the grid is under duress, much like the challenges that we saw here in Texas just a few weeks ago, that was really kind of our third big event with the winter weather events, being able to shed load in order to give it back to users that absolutely do need it. And what happened just a couple weeks ago, we had 16 gigawatts on Sunday night in ERCOT that went to load demand, including some of our Skybox facilities. We have 2 campuses that participate in that, and went to either backup generation or just simply eliminated load entirely in order to participate in load demand. That enabled the grid to continue operating. Without that total 16 gigawatts coming offline on Sunday night, the Texas grid would have been in absolute serious trouble beyond what we saw.
Sure.
And I think we're big proponents of just continuing to increase the amount of load demand products and projects that we can deploy in the state, because they really do act as virtual batteries, and just helping to balance everything out. And you're seeing that in a lot of other places as well. And I think data centers could be a very meaningful component of that solution, acting as virtual batteries to the grid.
Rob, thanks so much for joining us and giving us your thoughts. It's great to sit down with you, and we're really excited for Skybox and the future of the company and what you all are doing. It'll be fun to see what happens in Chicago as well as the other markets that you all will be in soon. So always good to see you. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, David.